G'day everyone, this is MrStevetic and welcome to an episode of Stevetic Talks. The gameplay you're going to be seeing in the background today is from Prison Architect. It's an early access game currently available on Steam by Introversion Software. I'll leave a link in the description below to the Steam page if you like it and you feel like picking it up. So, let's do some real talk, shall we? Big news in Australia today is everybody's losing their mind over the execution of two drug smuggling ringleaders, Andrew Chan and Moy Sukumaran. Okay, they were two people along with six others who were executed in Indonesia last night, and there's a fair bit of butthurt going around the media and that kind of thing about how they were executed and so on and so forth. So, before we get stuck into this, let's have a look at some facts, shall we? Now, back about 10 years ago, 2005, Chan and Sukumaran were arrested in Indonesia along with six other mules in regards to smuggling about 9 kilos of heroin out of Indonesia. It sucks. They went to a country that has the death penalty for drug convictions, big signs all over the place, and they got nabbed. Where the other six talked, gave information about who was ahead of the ring, who was involved in what. These two didn't cooperate with police at the time. During their sentence hearings, they never showed any remorse for their actions, flat out blatantly lied about their involvement, and they were given the death penalty. After 10 years of appeals and incarceration last night, they were shot by firing squad. It's a bit rough. Whether or not you're a proponent of the death penalty or not, and I myself, I'm not a fan of it. I'm lucky enough to live in a country that doesn't have it. But I think there are some reasons about why this captures our attention so much that need to be addressed before we get down to the meat of the matter. Now, for those of you who are unaware, Australia was a colony founded by the British about 230 years ago, and our first colony, New South Wales, was a convict colony. Okay? The people who were sent here were Britain's trash, people who they couldn't afford to keep in the prisons, didn't want to keep in the prisons, so they sent them away for a life sentence of living on a beautiful tropical land with plenty of space, clean air, long golden beaches, or, the regular joke. What happened was that those reformed prisoners, those who showed that they were willing to contribute positively to society, were released from their sentences, given land, and told, make this place better. Okay? We've also got a history of larrikin criminals sticking it to corrupt police and that kind of thing. Famous bushrangers such as Ned Kelly, who famously took the wife of the officer who was chasing him to church one Sunday morning while he was out looking for him, while the officer was out looking for Ned. So, looking into our history, looking at how we came to be as a nation, it's understandable that when we see these two criminals who've turned their lives around, that as a nation we look at it and we go, that's a lot like all of us, that's a lot like how we got here, and it's not fair. It's something that we might want to consider when going into this, as a nation. Why is this stinging so much? But the fact of the matter is that it shouldn't, okay? Chan and Sukumaran were the only two who didn't assist with investigations beyond the point of capture. Not only that, but they weren't mules, and I think this is something that a lot of people tend to forget. These guys weren't the guys who were smuggling the heroin. These were the guys who were organising the whole thing, getting people involved, doing the logistic work, and they were the brains behind the operation. Well, at least the Australian-based brains. Sukumaran was the enforcer, and this wasn't Chan's first rodeo either. He tried this a couple of times before, and for reasons unbeknown, things were put off. And this is, in the media malarkey that's been happening the past couple of months about it, these are facts that seem to be forgotten by a lot of the commentators, a lot of the talking heads. These people, it's not like they made a dumb mistake one time. You know, this was consistent behaviour from these two, who had a lot more opportunity than, you know, a lot of people who get into this kind of life. There's rumours going around that they didn't cooperate because they were afraid of reprisal from the people who were actually supplying the drugs. And look, that's a fair concern, if anything, but the fact of the matter is that, you know, it's not like the movies. People don't tend to die when they're in witness protection or that kind of thing, and there wouldn't have been a lot of trouble to go, hey, look after our families, because we've been told if we talk to you about what's going on, they're going to be in danger. And you can bet dollars to donuts that everything would have been done to protect their families, even, 10 years after the fact. Drug dealers tend to have a very long memory. It's interesting to me that people seem to forget these facts, and that they treat these two like heroes, or like martyrs, or like what they did deserves a slap on the wrist. You know, let's blame everybody else but these two for their actions. People are going in so far as to say, well, the AFP should have stopped them at the airport. Why? What had they done? At that point, what had they done? There's no conspiracy charge for drug smuggling. There's not. You need to have the goods in hand. So they did what they needed to do. They actually... Because chances are, if they didn't inform the Indonesians, those drugs may have still gotten into the country, one way or another. If they had stopped them at the airport, they might have tried a different way. And it's sad, it's sad that these two are dead, but I've always been a proponent of the fact that you do the crime, you face the consequences. You do the crime in another country, you face the consequences of that land. Because you're not in Australia anymore, you're not in America anymore, you're not in Canada anymore. You're in a country that, across the region, and it's not just Indonesia that does this, but across the region, people get executed for smuggling drugs. And it's posted everywhere, and it's part of travel advisories. Don't smuggle drugs into or out of this country, or you will be killed. People are making allegations that the judiciary that tried them and gave them the death sentences wanted bribes. Pay us $130,000 and we'll give you a reduced sentence. It's no strange fact that Indonesia's judicial system is corrupt. Okay, we've known that for years. We've also known what they do to drug smugglers for years. There is nothing new here. Absolutely nothing new. And yet people seem to want to... Well, I shouldn't say people, because there are a lot of people going, hey, look, these two aren't heroes. But there's a lot of people in the media and celebrities and going, well, this is an outrage. It's really not. It's really, really not. To all those people who sit there and go, well, we should boycott Indonesia and we should remove aid from Indonesia because how dare they do this, and we should force them to change their laws. It's a really scary kettle of fish to open up. It's a really scary can of worms to unleash. Think about it this way, okay? Australia's known for having some pretty tough and, pretty tough gun laws. What would happen if NRA lobbyists from the United States came over and said, we don't like your gun laws, change them now or bad things will happen? Think if Australian gun law lobbyists went to the United States and said, we don't like your gun laws, they're too laissez-faire, change them or bad things will happen. Let's extend the hyperbole further. someone from Saudi Arabia comes to Australia and says, we don't like the fact that your women are allowed to drive cars, change it or bad things will happen. And you can run the hyperbole that far, because if that kind of behaviour gains precedent outside of, say, binding UN sanctions and that kind of thing, then all of a sudden a sovereign nation's ability to write and conduct laws as they see fit becomes perilous. It becomes something that can't be guaranteed. All of a sudden, all of our laws become questionable by other nations simply because they don't like the concept of them. And that's a dangerous precedent to want to set. Indonesia, like it or not, is a sovereign nation. And Indonesia, whether you like it or not, is able to conduct executions for drug smugglers as they see fit and give clemency where they see fit. The Indonesian president, Widodo, hasn't seen fit to give these guys clemency, and you can bitch and whinge and moan about the fact that he hasn't looked at things properly. It's still his decision. You know, these guys went through their entire legal process. Some people are saying, hey, the legal process isn't up for them. They still had that constitutional court challenge, except it's already been ruled. And their lawyers have already accepted the fact that even if they were successful in this constitutional challenge in Indonesian constitutional courts, it wouldn't have affected things retroactively. Those guys' appeals were spent, they were still going to die. The fact of the matter is that they broke the law. They broke the law in a country that has a penalty for this kind of thing. They're not heroes. They're not the great Australian larrikin bushranger. They're not our heritage. They may have reformed in prison, and very, very good on them. You know, they did some good with the last 10 years of their life. But these were bad people, and they were bad people with a history of doing bad things. Bad people with a history of doing bad things who had shown previously that if they failed in one attempt, they'd do it again, and they'd try again, and they'd try again. You know, this wasn't a one-off thing. And it really annoys me that people seem to forget that. Really, really annoys me. At the end of the day, does the crime fit the punishment? Well, look, that's a different story altogether, you know. Where do you draw the line on what drugs are acceptable and what drugs aren't? You know, do you do it for weed? Do you pick and choose? And really, that's also dangerous. You know, the laws of that nation state we don't tolerate drug smugglers. And yes, sometimes sentences will be different for one person than another, but with each individual case, it's comparing apples to oranges, and you need to look at the particulars of the case in front of them. You know, some people say, well, you know, dumb kids make mistakes, and they shouldn't be punished for them. Dumb kids die from making dumb mistakes all the time, whether it be getting drunk and getting behind a wheel of a powerful car, driving down the road doing 120 kilometers an hour and wrapping their car around a tree or a power pole, or heaven forbid, someone else's car and taking another person with them. You know, these guys played a dangerous game. They played a game where not only were they driving drunk down the road in a high-powered vehicle doing 120 kilometers an hour before wrapping their car around a tree, but they had other people in the car with them, and they were endangering other road users as well. Now, when I say road users, I mean people back here in Australia who are susceptible to taking drugs like heroin. These guys died 10 years ago. It just took their bodies 10 years to catch up. And really all they've been doing for the past 10 years is their souls have been subject to purgatory, knowing that they were going to die. Feel sorry for their families. I especially feel sorry for their mothers, because their mothers are going to be sitting at home going, what can I have done different? To Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Sukumaran, all I can say to you is that you did nothing wrong. Your kids made an informed decision that I'm sure is well outside the guidelines of how you raise them. don't feel guilty and don't blame yourselves for what happened. The blame rests squarely on the shoulders of your sons, not on you. So, look, I think that's going to just about wrap this up. This is hopefully going to be the start of a channel relaunch, and as always, like, favourite, subscribe, do whatever you want to do, leave comments. Fortunately, the channel is small enough that if you do leave a comment, I should be able to respond to you, and if there's a subject that you would like me to talk about, then by all means leave it in the comments. I'll do my research, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be Australian-centric, it can be anywhere in the world. I'll do my research, I'll throw an opinion out there on it, and I'd love to have a discussion with you people watching this. Until next time, I've been MrStevetic. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope this finds you well.